One of the doctrines widely taught and accepted in Christianity is predestination. It seems like most Christians believe that our futures have already been determined before we're even born. And one of the passages that they usually use is Romans chapter 9, verses 11 to verse 18. I'll quickly read these three verses in your hearing. Paul says, "For the children being not yet born," referring to Jacob and Esau, the twins, "neither having done any good or evil, that the purpose of God according to election might stand, not of works, but of him that calleth. It was said unto her, The elder shall serve the younger. As it is written, Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated." So most of the people, when they look at this passage, they believe that, Jacob and Esau's future were already determined by God before they were even born. So they speak of the election to say, regardless of whatever we do in life, we have already been elected for whatever route that we're going to take. Those who are going to heaven and those who are going to miss heaven, God has already determined it from the day that we are born. But I think people who believe in this usually don't follow the context closely. So it's very important for us to follow the context to help us, understand where Paul is coming from and where Paul is going with these passages. When you read Romans chapter 9, from verse 1 to verse 12, you realize that Paul is concerned about his fellow Jews who has not accepted Christ, but they believe that they are God's people and they are also children of Abraham. So these Jews actually believe that, they are special in the eyes of the Lord because of their forefather Abraham. Just for this, because they are Jews and they are Abraham's seed. But when we read, John chapter 8, I think from verse 31 to verse 35, Christ explained that being, a biological descendant of Abraham does not matter. It's not even an issue. What is important is to be a descendant of Abraham by faith. Christ brought the issue of faith unto them, where he was now saying, even those who are not biological descendants of Abraham, they can be the seed of Abraham by faith. So Christ was explaining the importance of faith in Jesus. So in other words, Paul is saying there was nothing special about being a Jew, while or Abraham's seed apart from Christ. This is what Paul is trying to explain in the, passages that are preceding. So when you read the entire Romans, it assures us that, while the promised Messiah came from Abraham, that is Abraham's bloodline, salvation is offered to the entire world. Read Romans chapter 3. So it also tallies with Christ's words, where he was also speaking, to that Phoenician woman when he says salvation is for the Jews. Paul clarifies it here. You need to understand the context because Christ himself is the one who made us understand that salvation is for everyone. So in verse 13 now, where Paul now comes, and he's quoting Malachi chapter 1, verses 2 and verse 3, and he says, as it is written, quoting in these chapters, that the book that I've given, that is Malachi. Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated. I want you to understand that God didn't reject Esau for salvation, according to this passage, as many people believe. To say, Esau, he could have done nothing. There was nothing that he could do, because God has already, put him on this earth to be destroyed. But Jacob was put on this earth to be saved. That is what many people believe. But when you read contextually, especially the preceding verses that we have just, tried to explain, you realize that according to Paul and according to this verse, God didn't reject Esau for salvation, But he rejected Esau for being the ancestor, of the promised Messiah. And Jacob was preferred instead. And we need to understand, why is it that Jacob was preferred instead of Esau? It is because of who God is, who sees the future, but we will come back to that one later. So this is the immediate context. The immediate context helps us to understand that this verse itself is not even speaking about these guys, being already determined whether this one is going to be saved or this one is not going to be saved. But it was about the responsibility that God was going to give to one of them in the plan of salvation. And God had to choose Jacob for some reasons that we're going to look at later. Now, the broader context is also very important, because I've told you that this verse, as it is written, Jacob have I loved and Esau have I hated, it has been taken from Malachi chapter 1. So I think it will also be wise to just read, Malachi chapter 1 verses 2 and verse 3, so that we can get the gist of the broader context. Verse 2, I have loved you, said the Lord, yet ye say, wherein hast thou loved us? Was not Esau Jacob's brother, said the Lord, yet I loved Jacob, and I hated Esau, and laid his mountains in his heritage west for the dragons of the wilderness. Here in this passage, God is defending his love for Israel by reminding them of the definite distinction he had made in the birth of the twins. But I want you to understand that this whole context is not about those two twins. It is not talking about the individuals. Many people believe that, this passage is speaking about the two, to say this one, that is Jacob and Esau. But if I were to ask you, do we have any proof in the Bible that Esau as an individual saved Jacob? There is not even a single verse, because we know that Jacob ran away and went to Laban, and when he came back, Esau was already a great man who had many possessions. And when they met, Esau had to leave the place, and he went to live, in the mountains of Seir, where he founded his kingdom, the Edom kingdom. He never saved his younger brother, Jacob. So when the Bible is referring to Jacob and Esau, it is not referring to these two individuals, but it is referring to the two nations that came out of these. From Jacob came Israel, and from Esau came the Edomites. So he's speaking about these two nations. And this other nation, that is the Edomites, is the one that was now saving the Israelites. Why? Because we know that the Edomites, they were idolaters and they had rejected God. So that's the reason why God had to choose Israel, and he rejected the Edomites. This is what the verse is talking about. So it's not like Esau did not have a choice. He had a choice to follow God, but he chose not to follow God, and he passed idolatry to his descendants, and that was how things were ended. So when you look at the context of the election, as many people understand the election to be, they think to be elected simply means that God has already gazetted you, he's already framed someone to be something in life, which means that from the day I am born, God already frames me to be something. Just like many people believe that Judas was already framed before he was born, so that he can be the betrayer of the Messiah. So to them, Judas had nothing that you could have done. You were just supposed to betray the Messiah, but because that was his role on this earth. But that is not true. That is not true. When you read the whole Bible, especially the Gospels, find that everyone has been predestined for salvation. Everyone has been given a chance to be saved. So it is all our choices, whether we want to be or we don't want to be. So when you look at the context of the election, you find that it was enabled by God's omniscient nature. Remember, God foresees the future. So he saw the future of Jacob, he saw the future of Isaac, and he realized that between these two, the one who can actually be fit to be an ancestor of the Messiah is Jacob. He realized that the one who can actually fit in the plan of salvation was Jacob, not Esau. So when he chose Jacob, it was not because, he just chose him at random, no. But it was because he realized that Jacob can actually be the father of the Messiah because of probably their characters. So there was no arbitrary or random choice on the part of God by which Esau was shut out from the blessings of salvation. No, the gifts of his grace through Christ are free to all. There is no election, but one's own by which any may perish. And this is very true. This is very true. There is no election that God can make which is against what we are and what we ought to be. So God elected a character that is in harmony with his law and one who would reach a standard of his requirement to enter the kingdom. That is how God used it to choose Jacob over Esau, to choose Israel over the Edomites. As I've said, all have been predestined for salvation, but our choices are the ones that are going to determine where we shall be. And I want to add by looking at the word hate, because there are many people who are now confused. How can God hate someone? Because the verse is saying, God loved Jacob, but he hated Esau. Why would God hate Esau? I'm just trying to imagine, Esau is lying there. He's just an infant who has been born. He does not know anything. But in heaven, God had already put an X on him. He hated him. But I want you to understand, the words that are used in the Bible, they might have a different meaning from, the contemporary, interpretations of words. So it's important for us to go back to the time of the Bible and understand what it means. Because when you look, the word hate in the King James, as it is being used in this context, it meant something else other than what we think when it comes to the word hatred. Just look at Luke chapter 14, verse 26, you understand. So it must be translated as communicating an attitude of acting divine disfavor. So the best way that we can put there is the word reject. God did not hate, Esau as we understand the word hate, but he rejected Esau. To reject simply means that he did not find favor in God's eye to be a perfect candidate, to be the carrier of the Messiah. So it simply means that to hate yet is to put others last and not first. So in choosing, when I'm choosing something, the one that I put at the last, I might as well say I hate it. Not necessarily meaning that, I have nothing to do with it, but it is because in the order of rank and importance, this one has been ranked at the last. And this one it's very easy to understand because Paul here, he uses a hyperbolic language, to emphasize a point. So I want you to understand, this concept of predestination, to say there is not even a single person who had been predestined to be destroyed, as many people believe. No. Judas Iscariot was not predestined to be destroyed. He made a choice. Every human being that has been born on this earth will have to make a choice whether they want to be saved or they don't want to be saved. In other words, what I'm saying is that when I say all have been predestined for salvation, I'm actually saying from the day that you are born, you are already put in the class of those who are going to be saved. But it is now for you to either defend yourself in that part, or you are going to remove yourself because of what? Of your choices. This is exactly what is happening here. So that verse, when you look at that verse in Romans chapter 9, verse 13, and Malachi chapter 1, verses 2 and 3, it is not speaking about the predestination. It is not speaking about the issue of people being already marked for salvation or being lost. No, he was speaking about their to be elected for a certain purpose, that is to fulfill the plan of salvation. Even though God chose Jacob. In other words, actually, when God was choosing Jacob, he was also doing it for the Edomites. Because he realized that if I were to choose Jacob, Israel can actually be a light to the Edomites, and they might as well see God and make it to heaven. If you would have chosen the Edomites with their character, they were just going to bring darkness all over the world. So God was actually doing it for humanity. So it is also common even in the contemporary, world that we are living, because God knows our lives. He knows the day we are born. He knows everything about us, even our futures. God might sometimes choose people differently for different roles in accordance with what they shall be, because at the end of the day, God's plan must be fulfilled. This is exactly what these passages are talking about. So don't let the world lie to you that you can't do anything about our faith. In fact, we are wholly responsible for whatever happens in our lives. And this is the truth, which cannot be denied. Don't relax. Don't give away faith. Don't be reckless in life because you think that whatever you are going to do, God has already ordained on whether you are going to be saved or you are going to be lost. That is not so. That is not true. God wants everyone to be saved. Read 1 Peter. God wants everyone to be saved. That's why some people even prolongs their lives while they are in sin. Why? Because He wants them to find a chance to come back to Him. God wants everyone to be saved. So those who are going to be lost, it is because they had made a choice to be lost. So are we predestined for salvation? All of us? Yes. Yes. But if you're going to be lost, it is because you have rejected God. You have rejected His election. So I personally believe in predestination, but not in a way that other people believe, to believe that we have already been marked. Those who are going to heaven and those who are not. No, everyone had a place in heaven. But the question is, are you going to choose heaven or you are not going to choose heaven? With these words, be blessed.